Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Satology means science of truth or a study of truth. It's a true antonym of mythology, which means the science of myth, which is imagination or study of myth. Now, it's so unfortunate that everything in the Indian Vedic history is called mythology. And that is an accepted term in the academic circles, which is very sad because the connotations of that word go, it is imaginary with no proofs. I have personally proved all the locations of Valmiki Ramayana, and I have also personally proved the locations mentioned in Arjuna's travel, Bhim's travel, and in from Mahabharata. I personally proved that. It's all in my books. Today we are discussing a very, very important topic connected to the current affairs. And I have my great friend and a great analyst, and actually he is a mentor to many researchers also on strategic side. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Well.
Uh, Abhijit, like people look up to your shows. This is a big thing here. Your analysis is hauntingly truthful sometimes. Okay, so coming back to this Afghanistan situation, we all know Afghanistan was once a part of India until 1919, where the British carved it out with a Durand line. So, how important does the current leadership even know that history in Afghanistan?
Sorry, could you repeat how?
How, like, do the current leadership, political leadership in Afghanistan recognize that they were part of India once?
Vaguely. See, for them, India was part of Persia.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh,
they feel they're part of a greater Persianate culture. Because remember, Persia itself is, we think of Persia as somehow being Persian. It isn't. It's
it is.
actually a very Turkic culture, which is trying to rediscover its Persian roots in that sense. Because, Persian culture spread because of Turks, not because of the Persians themselves. In fact, you look at early Persian dynasties, they adopted Aramaic. They spoke Royal Aramaic, which wasn't Persian at all. They wrote in cuneiform, which again wasn't Persian at all. It was Semitic from Iraq. And in fact, it was the Turks who gave Persia a sense of being Persian and what it was to be Persia. Of course, the Persians never want to talk about that for obvious reasons. It hurts their nationalistic spirit. And it was because of these several it was called the Persianate Age, because even the Ottoman Empire, the official language was Persian till about 1500 and something. So, till the 1500s, the court language in Egypt was Persian, uh, depending on the dynasty. In Iraq, it was Persian. In the Ottoman Empire, it was Persian. In the Khwarezmian and Seljuk Empire, it was Persian. And obviously in Samarkand, Tashkent, Uzbekistan, all those places, it was Persian. In Delhi, it was Persian, right? So they saw themselves as part of a Persianate whole. And their connection to India isn't based on ancient history, it's based on the Persianate age.
Earlier it was a title given that a Hindu rate of growth, which was given by the Congress. Now we have seen the economics of the entire, all the countries which are driven by the religion. It's 57 Islamic countries, South American Christian countries, and Catholic countries. Most of those countries are economically poor. So what do you have to say on that? Because the US and UK and other European countries are successful where they've kept the religion out of the politics. They brought common sense in. So do you think that faith had an important role in economic not so progress in those countries?
Look, faith really didn't make a difference from what we can tell. Uh, uh, it was very much a case of, different periods of progress and different periods of ossification within the same religion. So you look at Christianity. Today, you attribute the scientific revolution to Christianity, to the Renaissance and things like that. There was a time when the loss of knowledge was attributed to Christianity. There was a time, today, we attribute the loss of knowledge to Islam. But at one point of time, knowledge was preserved because of Islam. You see that with Hinduism as well. Once we were great creators of knowledge, then we became a complete zero of knowledge. And we remain a shithole, not producing any original knowledge anymore. So, it's been, every religion has, when it gets self-confident, it becomes unafraid and pursues knowledge. And then invariably decay sets in, and you lose knowledge. So it's cyclic. I think it's cyclic. It could also be linear. I mean, there could be a phase where Hinduism is never going to come back to where it once was.
So coming back to the India's neighborhood right now, because Afghanistan is in international news. In fact, President Biden had to give a statement on that. And so my essential question is, if Afghanistan is, and even Pakistan is, they really honestly admit their historical identity, do you think it will make a difference over there in terms of governance? Because the governance is simply lacking in those territories.
See, they don't need governance. You're trying to impose, you're doing isomorphic mimicry here, wherein, we assume that what is the norm in America should be the norm in Afghanistan. What makes you think Afghanistan hasn't always been like this? It's always been an extremely violent, feudal, this is what feudal societies were like. Today, what we see in Afghanistan is exactly how Afghanistan has always historically been. So I don't know why we need to impose this sense of order to fit into our, uh, 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 you know, uh, our contextualization of the world, that everything has to be like us. I find this particularly disturbing with all the Abrahamic faiths, because, it seems like God created human beings in his image, and therefore uh, everybody should be in the same state of existence as somebody living in Chicago or Los Angeles is. That's not the way it works. All right. Different parts of the world are in different stages of anthropological evolution. This is a pre-modern, pre-industrial, feudal, violent society, which is overwhelmingly rural, in an area extremely prone to deprivation, requiring a lot of plundering of your neighbors and things like that. Not unlike, say, the Mongolian steppes when the Mongol Empire emerged, uh, or the Turkic steppes when the Turks emerged. So it is what it is. It's always been that way. It's going to continue to be that way.
So do you think that all the responsibility of the neighboring states of that territory, Afghanistan today, do you think that their contribution will anyway help? Because India has provided more than $4 billion worth of help there. America has spent $1 trillion in, or $2 trillion in 20 years. And despite that, we are still at the same position what we were in 20 years back or even 30 years back. You're absolutely right, actually. So do you think anyone should make an attempt to make a peace there or no?
No. I mean, if $2 trillion can't teach America what is right and what is wrong and not to do regime change and crap like that, I don't think anybody's, and mind you, America's not learned its lesson. Under Biden, you're going to see the same clowns, because you look at the think tank clowns sitting in DC, they've learned nothing. They still get money. All of them were wrong about Afghanistan. All of them were wrong about Iraq. All of them were wrong about Syria. But they continue to get money. They continue to get platform despite being so completely wrong. It's a joke. It's virtually like a communist dictatorship where you can keep making mistake after mistake. I mean, I think of Washington think tanks as Kim Jong-un. It doesn't matter how many people you kill off, how many famines you inflict on your own people, how many deaths you inflict on your own people. The central proletariat will keep clapping you on when you come on stage and keep giving you contract after contract after contract to produce your shit and spew your hot air. I mean, why does America need nuclear reactors or green energy? You just shove pipes up every Washington, D.C. analyst's ass, and you'll have enough biogas, naturally produced biogas, to run America for the next 100 years completely renewably.
There is a, you're absolutely right on analysis, because the Washington think tanks, They severely work on a very partisan viewpoint, and their viewpoints have never changed.
I don't mind if it's partisan. A partisan viewpoint at least produces different points of view. The problem here is they don't work on a partisan viewpoint. They basically all angling up. They are not acting as a reality check to their own parties or to the other party. They're basically engaging in intellectual masturbation, futile intellectual masturbation. I mean, there's nothing wrong with masturbation if you actually orgasm at the end of it. This is just like endless masturbation without ever orgasming. To get it's like a verbal CV. Okay, I have validated all your stupid points of view, so please make me undersecretary or secretary of state or some crap like that in your next administration.
Erica Garcetti has been appointed as an ambassador to India. He has been known to have very anti-Indian views. He has been very close to the pharmaceutical lobby. And do you think there is an agenda behind appointing that? Because I know Erica Garcetti, his past record has been absolutely dismal in every single public office he has owned, especially being the biggest office he has owned is the mayor of Los Angeles. So do you think that will have an impact on Indo-US relations?
Not really. The historical record has usually been that if an ambassador makes himself unwanted, the Indian government just stops meeting him. They ignore him. They don't give him anything. And unless he has access in Delhi, he's not useful to DC.
Many important public officials have made very conflicting statements on Indo-Pakistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and also Russia and China. So do you think that all these conflicting statements, like I'll give you one statement example, that again, there was trying to be reset that Russia is the number one enemy. And before that it was, and now China is the number one enemy. And then terrorism is the number one enemy. All three different stands have been simultaneously coming from the new administration. What is your view on that? Do they really understand what's going on in that part of the world?
I don't think anybody in the Biden administration actually understands what's going on. And I'll tell you why. See, this is an ecosystem of intellectual masturbation. Like I said, nobody's actually speaking the truth. They're all mouthing off jargon, and it's a circle jerk. Maybe there's somebody who understands. I'm hoping there are people who understand, but from their public posture, I've not seen any particular perspicacity from any of these crowds. Not from the Secretary of State, not from the CIA chap that this man wants to appoint, not from the NSA. They all mouth off banalities and inanities. So they may actually be very, very smart and know what to do in private, but going by their public statements, that doesn't appear to be the case. And of course, the worry then is how much leverage do you have to actually act on what you know, as opposed to having to do what you have publicly committed to say, to do by your words.
In the case of Afghanistan and Pakistan, you're absolutely right. They have done the right thing. Wrong thing, but not understanding the issues over there. But in the case of India, I have seen that Indian government doesn't care about what America or Biden administration is doing. And they are going ahead with their plans. Like recently, the visit of
India is actually quite worried. I mean, the only person in the last 20 years to make Indian government officials shit scared was Donald Trump. They paid a lot of attention. They normally treat American presidents like dirt. They think they can deal with them in any form of way. Trump wasn't one of those people. They were so scared of getting on the wrong side of Trump that they would bend over backwards for that man. Right. So it was just you need that unpredictability, because having Donald Trump as president was a bit like being locked up in a room with a Rottweiler. Now that Rottweiler might be the sweetest thing and completely perfectly well trained, or it might just rip you into little shreds in no time at all. Whereas when Indian officials are in the room with, say, George Bush or Obama or Bill Clinton or Biden and Kamala Harris, they feel they're in a room with not, I mean, even a Labrador can, technically cause damage. This isn't even a Labrador. They feel they're in the room with a mosquito really. I'm not kidding. In spite of the power differential, they feel they're in a room with a mosquito. And it didn't matter if it was Republican or Democrat. They just felt, a mosquito is a mosquito is a mosquito. To paraphrase, a rose is a rose is a rose.
In the case of S-400, there were a lot of hue and cry about sanctions on India by the American administration, and suddenly they have turned cold. They don't even care whether India buys S-400 or doesn't buy S-400.
I told you it isn't going to happen because the American bureaucracy has to show they knew what was at stake. One sanction. Okay, just one sanction, and that's all it takes for India to claim that trust is broken. That's it. And that's the end of the relationship from the Indian point of view. No American company is ever going to get a contract in India ever again.
But American social media firms are ruling India right now in terms of Facebook has a data of 500 million Indians.
Yes, and wait and watch. Facebook ultimately had to comply with Indian law. Every company, Google, Facebook, YouTube, everyone has had to comply with Indian law except Twitter. And Twitter's CEO in India and lots of other of their officers are on their way to jail very shortly.
And one part of America is very happy with India's decision. And you can understand which one I'm talking about. That
of
India
course.
has...
But see, Twitter has also made a huge mistake to do. They blocked Getter from importing tweets. Now, the problem is that's a Section 230 violation. Because either you own your tweets and you can import them wherever you like, or Twitter owns your tweets and they can prevent you from taking it onto some other platform. Now, by blocking Getter's ability to import tweets, they've essentially invalidated Section 230 with regards to them being a platform. So they're doing in America what they tried doing in India. Now, I don't know because, Twitter fillets the entire woke crowd in America. And especially when you've got a walking cadaver for a president and a banshee for a vice president. You don't know where it's going, and a corrupt banshee at that for a vice president. You really don't know what palms are going to get greased, what favors are going to be done to not have the full force of the law come down on Twitter. But looking at Twitter's cockiness in India, I'm suspecting they're going to overplay their hand.
No, Twitter has definitely overplayed throughout the world by banning different governments and creating their own international platform, like policies, like banning countries as if it is their own. It's a foreign policy of America. Like they're continuously driving that. Now, next question comes to the fore right now. The current issues we have. Will India ever? India has provided so much help, but now they're evacuating their officials from Afghanistan, and India is trying to engage Iran and Russia in, I don't know whether it's for Afghanistan or it is independent of Afghanistan. So do you think that India will ever move ahead with protecting their own people in Afghanistan, because the biggest threat has been the Indian engineers? And do you think that Taliban will ever destroy dams and parliament houses donated by India?
They're not going to destroy anything unless it's got idolatry there. Any infrastructure they're going to take over. They're just going to take it over. That's it.
As far as the shipping lanes go, especially
shipping lanes are irrelevant in Afghanistan because it's landlocked, right?
Yeah, it's a landlocked country. But shipping lanes, if it compares to like China's export via Indian Ocean and through the Suez Canal, do you think India will be able to protect with the Iran getting hostile, and also China, which is lately less in the news than Afghanistan today? So, and China also investing in Afghanistan for some reasons. Do you think that it will have any impact on the trade of the world in that part of the world?
there's been so much speculation made about this. You remember the war of the tankers during the Iran-Iraq war and things like that. Nothing really happened. I think Iran today is so far back in military power. They play a very strong hand despite having a very weak military. But see, they're suited more to high mortality rate ground operations like Hezbollah are carrying out in Syria. They are not suited. So if you go into Iran, it's going to be disastrous for you. But as long as you restrict it to an air and sea campaign of just bombing infrastructure targets and things, nothing's going to happen. You can pretty much take out all their swarms of boats and their missiles and all of that crap. So I don't, in fact, there is less chance of things happening today than there was once upon a time. Remember, was it in 84 or 86? I forget now, 82, 84, 86, one of these years. The US sunk the entire Iranian fleet in the space of 2 to 3 hours. The entire fleet, they just sunk it. So it's then they're not that much improved right now. They're a joke.
Now, coming back to the USA and South America, now we see a resurgence of American aid to South America in a big way. And we see China also increasing their aid to South America for obvious reasons. Chinese are after the minerals and other things. So do you think that, according to you, that will India, if they adopt the same strategy to get a foothold in South America for obvious reasons, minerals and other things, is there a need, first of all, or do India has to catch up with China in South America?
Look, India has no way of catching up because we're not industrializing. We're a third world shithole. We're going to remain a third world shithole. There's no chance we're going to industrialize because industrialization requires a kind of social churn. Not doesn't require, but it ends up with so much social churn. It's impossible to manage unless you have a sort of a communist dictatorship that is able to compress the time frame into a very short period and disproportionately allocate resources, like the Holodomor, like the Ukrainian famine and famines across China and things, and North Korea, because those all have to do with allocations. They invariably end up with famines and things like that. So you can't compress industrialization into a short time period with a democratic government. With a not terribly representative democratic government, you could. So, for example, America industrialized when the number of voters were actually very small. Women couldn't vote, people of color couldn't vote, black people couldn't vote, etc., etc., etc. So it was easy to do all this stuff. Same in Britain, same in France. They all industrialized when the House of Lords was very powerful, when France was still a monarchy, or it became a sort of republic turned monarchy under Napoleon, and then the subsequent Napoleons, Napoleon III, and all of that. So it was still easier out there. In India, it's not going to happen. You can't do it. Not happening. Impossible. You look at all the Asian tiger economies, they were extremely dictatorial, and then they democratized when the information age starts, because the information age requires the state to take a back seat and for private individuals to take a front seat. It's not going to happen in India. I think India is just, we're just waiting for pipe dreams.
Coming to Georgia, India gave a gift to Georgia of their relic of their religious figure from India, a part of it, not the whole. Was there any military or strategic objective in doing that with Georgia? Or it was just a good feeling thing by the Indian External Affairs?
Look, we don't really have great relations. I mean, it's all huggy, touchy-feely, whatever. It's like kumbaya with Georgia, right? There's no real strategic connections or anything of that sort, because Russia has always been more important to us and we tend to ignore Georgia. But the Jindals, a big industrial house in India, do have certain plants in Georgia, but outside of that, I can't think of anything major. The thing is that for them, the remains of this Queen Ketevan, are very, very important. She's a saint. She's been canonized by the Georgian autocephalous Orthodox Church. And is a very interesting story of how she died. She went on resisting the Persians, and the Persians suffered King Shah Abbas. He got her imprisoned in Isfahan or Shiraz or one of those cities. And when her son continued the rebellion as punishment, uh, he literally had his torturers use hot iron pliers to, red hot iron pliers to pluck her flesh, plier by plier by plier. This was like very civilized behavior in those days. So, she became a martyr. And I don't know why all these martyrdom stories are so sadomasochistic, and they're like really, uh, they're like snuff porn. But yeah, so what happens is she becomes a saint for the faith. She refuses to convert to Islam. And you can just say it. Why do you have to get into the details of what exactly happened and then ponder over what happened? And anyway, and it's just one of those things. Her remains, some of them were brought and buried in Goa, and by the Portuguese. Because remember, at that time, for about 120 years, Hormuz, the same Straits of Hormuz that we're talking about, those narrow things between Oman and Persia, it's that little choke point. That was a Portuguese colony. So somehow Christians managed to smuggle her remains out, and from there to Portuguese India. And they've been DNA tested and things like that. And India said, look, it's part of our heritage too. We can't give the whole thing back to you, but we will give you some important remains back. So that's what we've done. It's just one of those tiny little soft power stories. It doesn't have a bigger.
No, it's a very true, because St. Peter's was hung upside down in the Vatican Square, and he bled through death from the skull. So that's how he was killed.
I doubt that very much, but anyway.
No, I was in Rome. I studied that.
Yeah, I know. I've been through all of that.
Anyway, the last point for today is the Indo-Russian ties are intrinsically related to nuclear trade now, not amongst the military hardware. Military hardware has been, like you said many times, it has been like a France, England, like every country has a footprint in India. But the recent attempts by Indian military to buy more foreign arms than, like, for example, LUH was considered better than Kamov 206. And but still there was reports that India might go in for Kamov more than LUH. Do you think it's going to happen, or is just a fake news going around in the social media?
It may be happening, because you never know. Indian defense is so disparate. It's like, have you watched Finding Nemo? The guppy fish in Finding Nemo who keeps forgetting what happened 15 seconds before. Indian defense is a bit like that. They don't know what's happening. It's a bit like, your nose is scratching. You want to pick your nose, and you're kind of challenged in terms of hand-eye reaction. So you don't just do that. You have to kind of go like, that's how Indian defense works. So they might buy Kamov, they might buy Sikorsky. For all you know, they might buy an African helicopter for South Unity or whatever it's called.
No, it's very funny that you say that, because LCH is being bought by Nigeria. That's what they said, and I don't know how fake, how real.
I'll light combat helicopter, Indian-made light combat helicopter being bought by Nigeria. I'll see it when I believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. Not happening. Yeah. Let's see. Unless they gift it to Nigeria.
Yeah, actually, Peru returned the ALHs. So Ecuador returned those.
And they returned them after 3 of 5 crashed.
And they bought 8 or 10.
They bought 5.
5. So the last point, and is very funny. Sorry about that. All the viewers are watching it. The last point, the elections in Uttar Pradesh and other places have seen the local elections have seen a big rise of Yogi Adityanath. Do you think it has anything to do with the upcoming elections? Because I have my records, I have seen that whenever they win the local elections, they win the assembly, they lose the assembly elections. So, do you think that is a possibility here?
So here's the thing. Local elections are not a gauge of state elections, and state elections are not a gauge of central elections.
Correct.
So I am usually very, very wary of separating council, district, and municipal elections from state level elections from national general elections. I really don't know. From what I'm hearing on the ground, he's pretty damn popular. So let's see. You tell me one pollster that's ever got things right consistently,
Especially in India.
uh, especially in India. It never happens, right? So it's not happening. Let's see what happens.
Thank you so much, Abhijit, on this edition of Bitter Truth. It's always fun to talk with you. I learned also, and at the same time, use very choicest words to describe the current situations.
Yeah, look, I mean, what's the point of being oh so polite and, taking around in circles and pretending to be profound like a DC think tanker who's basically farting into the camera and you're all going, like Emperor's New Clothes. Oh my God, I can't really say you're a dumb fuck, but, you're like,
No,
oh my God, you're so sweet, so
you
nice,
are
you're so
so
kind.
you are so
So
right.
if you guys think I'm a dumb fuck, just say so in the comments. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be so polite and all of that. And just because I'm gay, it's not homophobic for you to call me a dumb fuck.
No, the one thing people say that this show becomes exceedingly humoric for people. Now, about the DC think tanks, I'll tell you one thing. They're very good in lunches and dinners. And recently I attended one
Okay,
show.
so I'm sorry, guys, but to burst your bubble, but American food isn't really very good food. Okay. DC food, there are few good places like Founding Farmers. Okay, the maple smoked bacon and the apple smoked bacon, they're very good. You go to Sweet Georgia Brown, that's southern food that you get near the White House, that's very good. There are one or two restaurants like that are very good, but overall, they're not very nice restaurants. So, no, DC think tanks do not do good food. They just do very standardized, she kind of food. I don't understand what it is that Americans like, the kind of drivel that, Food 52 or the New York Times' cooking supplement put out, because I read some of those recipes and say, this is really a third-rate recipe. And for somebody who spent so much time in Moscow or Vienna or Italy, when I read a recipe, I can just tell you it's bullshit. More so when it's an Indian recipe, because I can clearly tell you that anybody writing that Indian recipe wouldn't know cinnamon from cloves if their life depended on it.
No,
So,
DC.
they're just pathetic. So no, DC food is not good. It's very she, and they'll use big. So for example, a Mars bar would be described as um, a dense, luscious layer of dark chocolate topped with uh, creamy, salty caramel nougat, topped with a chocolate ganache of a tempered uh, 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 cacao beans plucked by trained lemurs in Madagascar and mixed with milk by Swiss yodeling maidens. And you have to yodel at a certain frequency, and only then the milk from the Swiss alpine cow on a moonlit night will produce a certain kind of emulsified fat into the milk. And then, all that crap, like civet shit coffee that you get from Indonesia and crap like that. But in the end, it's just a Mars bar. Yeah. So, I mean, you can give it fancy names, but shit is shit is shit. To paraphrase, a rose is a rose is a rose.
I can say the same thing about DC think tanks. You put it so well. I attended a show recently on a DC think tank, very major think tank, and all the think tanks think alike. She was not able to tell where is Kashmir. I asked her just one question: can you tell me where is Kashmir? Can you point it on the map? She couldn't do it, and she made a 2-hour presentation on Kashmir. So, do you think they really study what they're doing, or it's just a
No, no, they
imagination?
don't. They don't. they read a lot of local newspapers and they think they know. They don't. Because look, when they come to India or wherever, they interact with a certain kind of people. And those are the talking heads who can speak English, and some of them who think they can speak local languages can't really speak local languages if their life depended on it. I mean, look, I've been living in India for so long. I'm 43 and I've spent almost what, 22, 23 of those years in India. Uh, I'm still learning things about this country which make me uh, look back at what I wrote 2, 3 years back and say, which idiot wrote this shit? So if I'm learning after 23 years of living in this country, but these guys feel that they've come in for a short vacation of like 2, 3 months on academic study and they somehow know this country better. Uh, uh, Look, the fact remains the way policy gets mismanaged in this country out of Delhi. Delhi clearly doesn't know jack shit about what's happening in India. So if your interlocutors are the government and government ass lickers in Delhi, then clearly neither do you, right? So it is what it is. But simple example. There was this very famous restaurant called the French Laundry. Is it still around? So my aunt took me there. She's like, "Oh, Vijay, you're gonna love this food. It's so delicious." And la di da di da. And they would come and they would, very fancy. They brought these pepper shakers and they would grind. I think it was flavored salt or flavored pepper or some crap like that in perfect circles on your plate. And it was all very shishi and all of that. And, he explained it was pasta and pappardelle, I think it was. And I have a house in Italy. So, I mean, I spend all my summers in Italy. And I'm sitting and eating it and going, for all that explanation you gave me, there's a fundamental price point mismatch between all the shit you just spewed. It wasn't bad. It was a decent pappardelle. But it wasn't that ooh ah thing. Uh, and, the nonna next door to my house, she taught me how to make pappardelle. It tastes just as good, if not better. In fact, some of my pappardelle tastes better than French laundry pappardelle. So I'm like, what the hell are you people on about? And then that chef, there was some expert chef course or something like that, a paid course online, which I took. And he was explaining, it turned out to be the French laundry chef. I forget what his name is now. He was explaining how to laminate the pasta and this and that. And I was showing it to all my Italian friends and they were laughing so badly that their farts were coming out of their ass and they would have literally torn their pants in half. Because they're like, what kind of crap is this? It's the same thing with steak. An average American steak, the kind of pains of literature that you write to getting your steak right, America almost never gets its steaks right. You go to Italy, you will be hard pressed to eat a bad steak. So I find there's a lot of, and I think this is Leninism, Marxism in America. Lenin used to say every idea is worth 1,000 pages of theory. I think in America, every bad steak is worth 1,000 TV programs, but at least get a good goddamn steak.
No, it brings to the question that is the mindset of most Americans and also Europeans that they are.
Mind you, a lot of Americans know that. The funny thing is, most people pointing out that a lot of American food is shit is also American. So this is the beauty of America, that the most eloquent self-reflection and critique of America comes from Americans.
That's right. That's right. And
but in India, it's jackasses versus jackasses.
So American cars and American food have a similar reputation, but the American exceptionalism, which is being taught to their students, and also the Western European exceptionalism, is it relevant today? Because now Indians are knowing what is the fact. So the IQ
America was exceptional. I think America should have taken a great deal of pride in its exceptionalism. It is no longer exceptional. It is turning today. I saw a shocking tweet by the Federal Bureau of Investigation urging parents and caretakers to spy on their own families for early signs of violent behavior. And that took me back to my early days in the Soviet Union, though I had a very benign opinion of it at that point of time. We all knew what was happening. Parents used to spy, spouses used to spy on each other, children used to spy on their parents, etc., etc. This is not how a society should function. And for the FBI to put a tweet like that asking you to spy on your own family, there's something very disturbing about it. It's very Gestapo Stasi like.
So thank you so much, Abhijit. And the recent Rafael controversy again came back, resurfaced, but it died before it started.
Yeah, because the only people implicated in it were the Congress party themselves.
So thank you so much, Abhijit. And I love this bitter truth with a little bit of humor. And also, my intention was not to, or our intention was not to hurt anyone, but to state the facts and from an alternative viewpoint. So,
No, I don't regret it if you got hurt a bit.
all right. Thank you all. And keep watching and do come back next week live on this show, Bitter Truth with Abhijit. Thank you. Bye.